Hi, can I just say a quick thank you also to Michael and all of you for giving me such a warm welcome. I have to say I've really enjoyed meeting so many of you, and I'm looking forward to speaking with more of you later this afternoon and tonight. Okay, so I have a lot that I want to try and get through in this amount of time, so please bear with me if I talk really fast. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from the green, leafy suburbs of Chicago, which made it all the more fascinating when I went to Hong Kong to visit my family, because I just remember being struck by the sheer verticality of the city, the overwhelming sensory overload of the sights and the smells and the sounds, and the humidity in the air. Okay, that's on my slide. Which really drew me to be fascinated by how many different people could fit in the small footprint of a city. So I was naturally drawn towards big cities, and I went to New York to complete my studies and then moved to London to work for Zaha Hadid. I added a slide of Los Angeles because it took me about 20 years of going to visit my family there to also grow to love the city as my home away from home. And I grew up spending a lot of time practicing the piano, a lot less time on the field. But it's been really interesting to reflect on how there are so many similarities between being a musician, being an athlete, and how that can contribute to being an architect. I think that there are so many values that are transferable in terms of the day-to-day commitment, the dedication, and the discipline, in terms of breaking things down into drills, picking up the technical skills in order to achieve a really high performance level, whether as a musician or as an athlete, and then on top of that to be able to then flourish with a level of artistry. Which brings me to where we are today. As a firm, we're a little over 500 people with unique stories just like mine. We're an employee-owned company based in London. Most of our staff are there, but we do have offices abroad, especially in places where we have projects on site, a couple of offices in China, a few colleagues in Europe, and we had to close our office in New York during the pandemic, but we're actively looking to establish our presence there again. And I think we are a testament to our founder and the long-standing team that she built up around her. And when I think about the idea of her as my mentor and the idea of mentorship, which we continue to carry through in the way that we lead our team, it really kind of strikes me as this idea of bringing out someone's full potential, helping them to believe in themselves. And I thought it's better if I just read directly from an interview that Zaha gave during one of her last exhibitions at the Hermitage. Because she was also a lifelong teacher. So when she speaks about her students and her staff, it's quite interchangeable. And she said, "Credit is due to the team who contribute to the discourse and bring something to the table. Their ambition to improve the project's impact on society is encouraged. You never know what can come out of the students or the staff when they're given the opportunity. They may be scared at first, not of me, of course, but they just need to be given confidence to do their best. With a degree of freedom, I think that's why students like to come and work in our office. They're part of the process and of the progress we make. Their only obligation is to work hard and do their best. You need to let people grow, and it's so exciting to see them and their work mature." And Zaha was a social catalyst and a perpetual. She was always reinventing and thinking about different ideas and ideating with the people around her, whether they were her students, her friends, her peers, her collaborators. And she really approached every success and milestone of the practice as a collective endeavor. And we try to continue that to this day with a number of different activities that focus on the team building away from the day-to-day deadlines, whether they're study trips to projects and project sites that we have across the world, or hosting external exhibitions and debates in our office in London, hosting artists in residence, and also carrying on the internal dialogue of creating places where people can share knowledge as well as continuing a program of outreach, whether it's designing schools for the refugee camps in tensile structures, or working with local students and showing them that there are tools to approach the climate crisis with sustainable design. As you all know, architecture is a collaborative effort. Even in the 80s, when the practice was not building a lot of projects, every single one of those paintings is a result of layers of paintings and studies, and it was many hands that came together. In this case, it's a painting called The World, which showed a number of projects that were unbuilt by the office in dialogue with each other. And when it comes to the buildings, we're also very much reliant on a supportive client, a visionary team, and a host of many different collaborators and consultants. And as the footprint of the office evolved from one room in a small Victorian schoolhouse to taking over the whole building, to the renovated garment factory that we're now based in Clerkenwell, we obviously had to recalibrate how we organize the internal team structure. And that means that moving from a team that all fit in one room and did all-nighters together, I don't have time to explain the entire timeline, but now we're kind of split into different clusters, which are about 100 people each, which act as financial centers for different projects. But on top of that, we have research teams, which look at digital design, sustainability, working in digital spaces, and as also special front-end design teams. And we create these project teams based on what that project would need. In line with that, we also have to look at all of the support teams and the support functions and platforms that help all of us to work efficiently. These are all things that you all know very well as the communications and how we invest in the appropriate channels and how we gear our messages towards different audiences, as well as create archives and platforms internally to create knowledge share, allow teams to be able to share about their work internally, and a quarterly journal. I think the most important thing about this is also that we're very conscious. It's a lot of time and it's a lot of effort, but it's mostly led by people. And it's finding the right initiatives which would have the biggest impact for the team. So the Vitra Fire Station was the first built building by the practice, and it came after many, many years of disappointments, potential projects that were then canceled, competitions that were won but canceled. And obviously in the evolution of a firm like ours, it really took the dedication of a team. And it's not just the dedication of a team through the highs and lows of the office, but also the dedication of the team to an idea. And in this case, with Vitra, it was looking at how the project concept emerges from the context of the surrounding fields and how that's carried all the way through to the internal organization of the project, down to the finishes of the partitions and the furniture. And I think Zaha's approach towards opening up a new language for architecture, to reinvent what's been done, and to escape, transcend the opportunities beyond an orthogonal grid. They also extended in her vision to the urban scale. So in red, this is a painting from the late 80s, a vision of London as a patchwork of villages, where the only opportunity to expand became these kind of decentralized focus points. And then more recently, this is a rendering of a project in China, which is almost topped out with all of those buildings. It's about 1 million square meters. I haven't converted that to feet. But it's one of those decentralized zones outside the city of Chengdu, which allows for an innovation hub and a mixed-use development to really thrive. And its focus is also on the walkability and the kind of sustainable approach. So with the radial orientation and the elevated plaza above the street, it allows people to move between the residences and the offices and the commercial spaces in a very, very short and direct path. And there's also the determination amongst the team and in pursuing the design concepts. So on the left, this is a very early parametric design project that we submitted for a competition. It was for the Central Business District in Beijing. And we didn't win the competition, and we kind of knew it was a bit of a long shot, but we still persisted with exploring this idea of approaching a site with a concept that can produce a family of results. And as the buildings change in height and scale, so they can be adjusted for each individual use case for those plots, they also increase in the way that the floors and the floors are distributed and the light enters in. So you can see how that seeded the project in Miami, 1000 Museum, which was completed more recently. And it still has, it's a kind of further lineage of this concept of creating an exoskeleton, where the external structure of a building can also express the internal function of each of the floors between it. And then more recently, this project called Tower C in Shenzhen, which doesn't have the exoskeleton, but still explores this idea of how to bring the outside park into the building, how to create these layers of external spaces as one progresses into the heart of the building, and to bring the light and the kind of atmosphere of the outdoor public spaces into the heart of the amenity spaces. And I think looking back on the evolution of the firm, it's always really important to also look at the agility and the ways that we recalibrate and always stay abreast of the changes in the industry and in the changing needs of our clients. For me, it also reflects across the types of projects that we do that do engage with a lot of movement and transport, and the ways that we have to approach a whole kind of complexity of balancing the needs of the front of house, the back of house, different layers of circulation, and at the same time providing a space that promotes positive health and well-being. Moving into the way that we practice and how that bridges the past, the present, and the future, and starting with the idea of craft. It's something that is at the crux of every project that we do, and as an analogy, even at the scale of this glass sculpture that we designed for the Dalmore, we worked with a glass foundry where we adjusted the design with the glass artist to really try and bring it to the edge of what's possible to make in glass. And after the piece came out of the kiln 4 months later, thankfully without a crack, we worked really closely with the glass artisans to ensure that they were also hand finishing it to the vision that we had for the design. But in order to do that, they had to create new tools. The tools didn't exist because the shape of the sculpture is always changing. And that's an analogy for how we work with a lot of the contractors and the fabricators for our projects, is balancing what we bring in the design process and really carrying it all the way through to the projects on site and looking at it artistically in artistic supervision. So for the project in the High Line, even though it was a very shallow offset that we had for the facade, we worked to ensure that the articulation of the different units really created the effect of the depth as much as possible. And that comes down to working with the fabricators in stainless steel and making sure that the detailing and the edge profiles were really precise and helping to heighten this level of volumetric articulation, or the different units that we were trying to convey. And lastly, glass on a facade in Hong Kong, just one of many stories. But for instance, to be able to get this kind of metallic effect, we had to work really closely on the prototypes to ensure that we had the right balance of the metallic finish facing outwards, but without reflecting too much in a kind of distorted double reflection inside the lobby spaces in the evening. And adaptive reuse is one of those increasingly important types of projects that we're all looking to be involved with. For the Port of Antwerp, the city decided to consolidate all 500 of their staff from different offices into one address. For the first tall high-rise building built in Monaco in 1963, it's on site now, and we worked with the owner to include additional penthouses and to be able to optimize the interior layout of the amenity spaces. But most importantly, by retaining the concrete structure, revisiting the types of materials that are recycled and used, and also changing the energy sources to renewable energy sources, we're able to minimize the lifetime carbon impact of the project. And finally, projects such as this hotel in Rome, which is opening soon, and the Serpentine Pavilion in Hyde Park in London. We also always try to renew heritage buildings and to bring them into the present with a very respectful approach towards the architecture, while also bringing a contemporary piece that continues to have a dialogue with it. We're working obviously with a lot of digital tools, and for us it's not just staying abreast of what the latest kind of software tools and packages are out there. It's also thinking about how we can customize the use of those tools, maybe mixing them or adjusting our workflow to ensure that we're bringing them together to have the most sophisticated approach for addressing all of these complex layers of information. There's a set of tools that we can do to take many different measurements to look at optimizing layouts in terms of cores and how they can create the best kind of circulation paths, allow the balanced against the amount of daylight penetration, or even looking at how we can coordinate complex projects like this metro station in Riyadh, where 3 different train lines come together. And in Saudi Arabia, that means that's 3 different consortiums, and being able to carry it out in a BIM coordinated manner where the trains can come together, and also where the circulation was integrated with the structure in a very kind of compressed and efficient way. And for construction techniques similar to craft, we work really closely with the contractors to find the best way to deliver each of our projects. For 1000 Museum on the left, where we created, it's the tallest building that's been cast with this type of exoskeleton, and it's cast on site. And the way that we did that was we had the panels fabricated in a factory in Dubai. They were shipped to the port in Miami, which is very close to the site. And then they were assembled floor by floor around the rebar and the concrete poured on site floor by floor. And that means that we were able to create this really beautiful factory finish, but minimize the carbon impact. And when it comes to panelization, we're doing many, many different studies to ensure that the panels actually carry with them the logic of everything from the transport to the logistics to how they're fabricated in the factory, while at the same time balancing that with the aesthetic of whether we're heightening the horizontality of a volume or we're trying to accentuate a certain curvature. A single example of many in terms of digital fabrication, where we're looking at building on past historic kind of construction techniques. In this one, we looked at masonry structures, so such as arches and keystones, where the structural forces are carried through to the ground through compression. And especially with concrete being such responsible for such large embodied carbon footprints in the built environment, we wanted to look at how it could be done, putting the concrete only where it was needed. We created a system where it can touch down at different points, so there's a lot of flexibility to build different configurations, but also create this kind of long span, where the concrete can also be then pulverized and reprinted into a future structure. But the most important development of this project was actually being able to 3D print in an arc. We've all seen the 3D printed concrete houses that are happening around the world, but the unique thing about this project was being able to achieve this bespoke curve as the concrete was being printed, and that entails linking up the software, the computation for the robotic arm, as well as the pressure in the nozzle and the cement mix. And moving into the metaverse, we also created this we worked with an artist in Los Angeles called Rafiq Anadol, where we trained an algorithm. For those of you who are familiar, it's called DALL-E 2 before it became public. And we fed it with lots of images and data from our projects. And we trained it with our team, then looking at the feedback from the algorithm, but also steering it into a direction so that it learned what we were trying to create, which is these kind of mostly interior spaces which are user-centered and have these dynamic spatial configurations which people would associate with the work of our firm. But most importantly, as we're we're very much on the optimistic end of the spectrum of working with new technology, but it's always reliant on the people and the experience of the designers who are steering the process. And the last project, which is this one that we've created in Fortnite. So it's a creator-based island that we worked on with Epic Games. And this is a project which allows everyone to be able to get involved in the design of their city. So it takes a site on the south of the river in London, and it tries to encourage the players. It's a multiplayer collaborative game, and they can bring in different voxels which have to do with walkable paths, structures, commercial, residential use, and they win scores, or they get a higher score based on the happiness of their character, which is based on the walkability and the mixed use and vibrancy of their neighborhoods. And I hope that that helps to share a little bit of a snapshot of what we're doing in London. Maybe see you in Fortnite. And I think as a firm, there are a lot of challenges when we're working, when we're growing, when we're working across so many disciplines. But at the same time, I think we also see that there's a rich kind of cross-pollination of ideas, and it really feeds back into the work when we're able to work across so many different types of projects in so many different regions. And to close, a quote by Zaha Hadid: "There should be no end to experimentation." And I think, if I have to summarize that in a sentence, it means that we're often embarking on journeys where we don't know the results, but we know that we're gonna arrive, and we know that we're gonna come to the end because we'll work collaboratively. We're going to lean on our past experience, and it also takes a pursuit with relentless curiosity and creativity. Thank you.